pressing question for you this morning. Why do you think Iran fessed up to shooting down the plane, even if it was accidentally, after denying it for 3 days?
I think they realized that they couldn't sustain that lie for very much longer. Quite a lot of attention had already been paid. There was satellite imagery. Too many people had been to the crash site and had noticed that there was an effort at a cover-up. So the lie could not be sustained any longer. They decided, after trying very hard to deny it, to come out in front and accept it.
So, Bobby, in the meantime, do you want to get your sense, your assessment in the meantime of the response there in Iran? You see those crowds after the Soleimani's funeral, hundreds of thousands of people, and then the crowds this weekend shouting death to the liars and calling on the Ayatollah to resign. Those are some unusual scenes, I would say, and unusual sounds.
Yeah, very much so. Now, look, it's a big country, and there are people with different views, and it's possible for people to hold both thoughts at the same time, being united in mourning Soleimani's death, as well as being against the
bringing down the regime.
The distinction is this: the crowds that came
Hallelujah
out last week for Soleimani,
Hallelujah,
with the full support of the
thank you,
government
Jesus,
supported these demonstrations. But the ones we saw last night, everybody who was chanting in those streets, everybody who came out,
yes,
was risking their lives, risking a bullet, risking their lives, the lives of their family.
They're tired of it.
That has got to count for something more than simply turning up for a funeral of a state-approved funeral of Soleimani. The people last night were incredibly brave, and especially since they knew that only a few weeks ago, people who had come out into the streets were mowed down in the hundreds for chanting similar slogans. So this is a very important moment. We're nowhere near a sort of the predicting the downfall of the regime, but it tells us that the anti-regime sentiments, or the anger against the regime, is now very close to the surface in Iran, and any provocation, this comes out into the open, and the regime can't just indefinitely go on killing its own people.
Bobby, President Trump tweeted in English and in Farsi words of encouragement to protesters, most of them Iranian students. What's the significance of this? He said the world is watching, and last week we saw tens of thousands mourning Soleimani, as you mentioned, and today we're seeing Iranians appearing to support Trump's latest tweet. So where's the truth?
I don't think Trump's tweets help at all. I don't think he has any real credibility, even with those Iranians who are protesting against the government. If the Trump administration wants to establish some credibility, the first thing to do is to drop the travel ban on the Iranians. If you want to show that you're on the side of the Iranian people, the first thing to do is allow them to escape the tyranny of their government. So I don't think Trump has a great deal of credibility here. His tweeting in any language is not going to move the dial. The Iranians who are protesting on their own without American support.
So, Bobby, let's think about this for a second, because you recall back in 2014, Russia never admitted its role in the shoot-down of Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 over eastern Ukraine back in 2014. So should Iran at least get a little bit of credit for admitting just 3 days later that it shot down this plane?
There's a big difference between shooting down a foreign flagged airline and shooting down, a foreign flag airline that is not carrying hundreds of passengers from your own country, and shooting down a plane where the vast majority of the passengers were Iranians. There is an important distinction there. Should the Iranians get credit for telling the truth after the lie failed? Okay, sure, but could they have continued to deny it? Yes, they could have, but I think it had already become very clear, not only to the rest of the world, but to a lot of Iranians. Don't forget, most Iranians, even though despite their government's best efforts to prevent them from getting information, have access to the internet, have access to international information channels.
Right.
And therefore, it was clear to any Iranian who had access to the internet that their government was responsible for this. So they could not sustain the lie.
That is indicative as well after military leaders in Iran also went ahead and backtracked about what they said about the plane's actual flight path and originally saying it made a turn and then backtracking on that. So, Bobby Ghosh, it remains to be seen exactly how much truth is going to come out of this whole situation. We appreciate you coming on and enlightening us on this situation this morning. Thank you.
Anytime. Thanks, guys.
And tonight, our experts break down these latest tensions and the impact of the U.S. conflict in the Middle East. I should say. Watch our special Iran Crisis at 9 p.m. Eastern, only right here on MSNBC.
All right, let's get to some more breaking news this morning. As many as 11 people have died in severe storms sweeping the country. Tornadoes tore through parts of Louisiana, ripping off roofs and leveling buildings in Bossier Parish. That's also where the bodies of an elderly couple were found in a demolished trailer, blown 200 feet from its foundation. You can see the catastrophic damage left after the storms pushed through Mississippi. Hundreds of thousands are without power from Texas to Georgia. And to the north in Chicago, freezing rain, powerful winds, and a storm surge from Lake Michigan flooded parks and inundated lakeside communities. As many as 1,200 flights were canceled at Chicago's two main airports. Freezing rain and snow also paralyzing parts of Kansas City. Police there responded to 54 crashes and helped 135 stranded drivers yesterday. And record temperatures both high and low. Parts of Boston this weekend hitting the mid-60s.
We'll take it.
In case you need a reminder, guys, it's January 12th.
We will take it.
It's just so bizarre right now.
It
I'm not
really
going to be happy
is
with the
weird.
changes.
They broke.
I want to stop right there. The weather is not only bizarre towards it being extremes, which is flashpoints towards the destruction of our atmosphere that is breaking down pertaining to atmospheric changes, atmospheric crisis that's happening up onto the planet. These are all part of the signs that that the people over here in America should be paying very, very close attention to. You know, it's not supposed to be 60 and 70 degrees in Boston. Come on. The temperatures out west for the past week has basically been normal, but we've had so many irregularities of abnormal that it ain't even funny pertaining to what's went on with all the storms and all the heat. Also, I want to make mention that it may not actually be the end of the regime over in Iran, the Iranians, but they have taken a great step forward, or a leap forward, such as Armstrong took on the moon, of trying to topple or change that evil, demonic, wicked regime that has literally controlled those people's lives just like a bunch of robots or a bunch of puppets. Thank God that we're finally starting to see some sort of positive development in all of this to bring that tyranny hopefully to an end. And I'm not saying that it's going to end overnight. Because you take something that's been in power for thousands of years, it's going to take a lot to grip it, to bust its grip, to destroy that type of tyranny. But at least it looks like it's giving strong indications that changes are to come, which is a major step for them. And like the commentator was talking about a while ago, so many people have access to the internet. And that is what is helping to waking their own citizens towards downing a plane that the majority of them on there was in fact Iranians. The rest of them, I think it was about a third Canadians, but the rest of them was Iranians. And for a country to shoot down its own civilian aircraft while they was trying to escape from the horrors that they probably all knew was fixing to fall up onto that area only speaks volumes about the depth of evil that that regime holds against their own citizens there in the Iranian government. These are bold, bold moves that has to come about, that has to be developed in the 21st century if the planet is ever going to become sustainable in the regard towards getting rid and stomping out this type of tyranny. There's no doubt that the Obama administration helped to fuel this by going about this in the wrong way, by thinking that they was going to be able to pay these people off by offering them all that money in which rightfully we owed, but by giving them Uranian rights of making their own uranium. That was a stupid, stupid move that now America has had to step in and reverse because of the, I'm going to use the word gross negligence upon to the Obama administration that ever done this. It was gross negligence. Regardless whether it was Republicans or Democrats pertaining to the Obama administration, this never should had occurred. And we're seeing signs of that towards them blowing their own people out of the sky while they're trying to escape. Now their people is taking on to the streets, finally drawing enough courage in saying enough is enough. So basically right now they are at a stalemate over there with their own citizens as well as the United States government, and I'm sure there's other governments that are watching this very, very carefully towards how it's unfolding, because this is stepping off into a new era, because it's obvious that the old era wasn't working towards dominating and dictating and slaying and killing their own people the way that they was doing. So 2 thumbs up, regardless of what may be achieved in the next 24 hours, 24 days, or 240 days, one way or the other. 2 thumbs up to this administration that has stepped up to the plate towards putting out the fire before it ever escalated into something major. 2 thumbs up to President Donald J. Trump.
Records in Central Park. D.C. had temperatures in the 70s yesterday.
People out in their shorts yesterday.
Very unusual. Let's talk, though.
It's not just unusual, but it's scary unusual to see these signs. We should be just as concerned whenever the weather has its irregularities right now as we would be if it was a massive hurricane hitting the United States right now. A Category 5 Katrina. We should be just as concerned right now with the weather and its irregularities here in America as we would be if a major event was happening, like an earthquake or a hurricane. And the majority of people, instead of them being overly concerned or overwhelmed by all these weather irregularities, They sit back and they enjoy it. Hey, this ain't so bad after all. We're having a very, very mild, pleasant winter, aren't we? We need to break out our Bermuda shorts. We all need to start enjoying things. Honey, let's see about taking the boat out on the water. That shows you how out of touch that the vast majority of the American people are whenever it comes to climate, environmental crisis going on worldwide. It shows you how indifferent that the majority of the people are in regards to seeing signs from the heavens and signs upon the earth such as man has never seen before, that the Bible predicts towards it being at the end. The end of what, one may say? The end of civilization as we currently know it to be. The end of a era fixing to watch the manifestations of the Heavenly Father break open the heavens and come and take out his precious people from this planet called Earth.
On a serious note here to the massive damage as dozens of aftershocks pound Puerto Rico. Why are so many of these quakes striking in one place right now? We'll have a live report from the island.
Plus, a new approach for House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, the strategy that could actually give her the upper hand in sending impeachment articles into the Senate. As informed.
NBC World Headquarters in New York. I'm Lindsay Reiser with a look at Times Square in New York. Well, it's raining. Yeah, we're supposed to hit record temperatures today, 65 degrees. Now let's get to more stories from around the world.
Right now.
Now to London, where the royal family.
More damage in Puerto Rico following a 5.9 magnitude earthquake. Aftershocks continue on the island this morning.
Yeah, the New York Times' Patricia Mazzi is on the phone in Puerto Rico for us. But look at all that shaking from yesterday's earthquake. She wrote an article, by the way, titled "Too Much Dread Fills Puerto Ricans as New Earthquake Stuns the Island." Patricia, thanks for joining us on this Sunday morning.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. How are they dealing with this, considering we've had now, 16 straight days of earthquakes or tremors?
Yes, it's really the biggest question on people's mind, which is when is the ground going to stop? And I think what is difficult to understand, unless you're in the quake zone, is that the ground doesn't really seem to stop shaking. It is vibrating under your feet most of the day and all the night. Even if they are not big aftershocks, the little ones that you can feel are just as unsettling, just as disconcerting. And so people are not sleeping, even if they're outside and feel safer there.
I couldn't imagine.
They don't get a chance to.
I couldn't imagine the horror that those people are sensing right now towards not knowing what is going to happen up underneath their feet, of having to sleep out in the streets and sleep out in the yards for their own well-being, for their own safety. I just couldn't imagine having to deal with that right now on that level. You talk about a psychological effect upon people's lives in a very, very profound negative way. You ain't going to get much any more profounder than that. That would be the same thing basically as being in a war zone where bombs was blowing up all around you and you not knowing if one was fixing to fall and hit on top of your house and annihilate you from humanity.
Rest. They think we had a big one. Why are we still feeling these aftershocks for days on end?
How about
Yeah, I'm stunned by this. Have you ever heard of anything like this, Patricia?
No, certainly not in Puerto Rico. The biggest earthquake that people here recall learning about as children happened in 1918. So there are not people readily alive, if any, who remember that and passed on any memories of it. At the time, some of these stories, and obviously this is a lot of rumor because we don't have
Hearsay.
a lot of reports from 1918, are that, the aftershocks lasted for a very long time after that quake. And there are many faults around Puerto Rico. They're just not typically this active. And the aftershocks sequence, people don't ever remember being this long, at least not any time in recent memory.
And that really is a telling part right there. The generations of Puerto Ricans had no idea that they had these active faults right there. And so for the last 16 days, this has been a powerful reminder of that. I do want to get a sense of how dire the situation is on the ground. Of course, several years after Hurricane Maria, the island is still recovering. Is power on? How dire is it?
The power has come back on slowly. The utility says, as of this morning, that 97% of the island has power. But in the quake zone, so in that sort of focused area of southwest Puerto Rico, people, in some cases, still don't have running water or power. Those are sort of the hardest places to get to because of some, issues of tumbled power lines and such. But mostly the problem is housing. As of last night, some 6,500 people were sleeping outside, either in government-run outdoor shelters or just in the patios of their houses and in parks and sports fields because they don't feel safe going back in. And if they're going to wait to have all these buildings inspected, it's going to take a long time before they can sort of certify that all of these structures are safe.
All right, Patricia Mazzi joining us in Puerto Rico. Just to give you a lay of the land, by the way, this is where all of this is happening. In the last 16 days for Puerto Rico, of course, you see the capital city there, San Juan, at the north. But look at that. That's the cluster of where all of those earthquakes have been hitting. The last one, that 5.9, about 24 hours ago, just hit off land in the sea there. But still, powerful impact on all of that area.
More than 2 weeks of these aftershocks that people are dealing with now. All right. Impeachment playbook, why legal experts say Nancy Pelosi still holds the cards on whether to call witnesses.
Lifting eye cream is absolutely my.
And tie them together and make it one thing. Rehearsal.
Are allocated, that's where you start to have your annual reviews and you start to see money put to work.
Call 1-800.
That's going to do it for this particular segment or event here at the Windmill Ministries missions in regards to what's going on with the weather, what's going on in Puerto Rico with the earthquakes, and of course what's going on with the Iranians towards the rebellion that's happening right now against the evil demonic regime over there.